name is Uyen Hoang, I go by she, they. I was born in Fountain Valley and hopped around a bunch of different places in Orange County, Santa Ana, Westminster, Fountain Valley probably, but my family ultimately spent most of their time in Garden Grove, which is where my family still resides there. My family was able to come to Orange County when they had came to America. So this is kind of our roots. My background is in Asian American studies, both undergrad and grad school, because I guess I loved it so much. And so I do know a lot about the things about the different immigration waves for Vietnamese Americans and the kind of the movement of the diaspora, particularly around the U.S. with the different kind of with the different bases and all that stuff, and particularly because of Orange County where we're at and the location close to Pendleton, like being able to see that history emerging from, like from the businesses and then like from community and people just coming together. I feel like I know a lot and I know not enough, right? I feel like there's always more stories to be heard and to learn about, right? Because everyone have different perspectives. But I think like it's really interesting to see the growth of Orange County, to see where it's come from, to see kind of like where it's going into now. Very interesting to see Little Saigon grow, to where it's at, right? There's a lot of more like second generation things popping up, a lot of more like diverse beliefs being able to be surfaced, whether that's politically or like just culturally. And I think that there's still a lot of tensions within, the community and all of that stuff. But I think like there is people feeling like they can deviate from what this popular narrative is, right? And so I think that's really exciting, seeing young folks kind of be able to share a little bit more, seeing more folks as, migration is still happening, right? People are still coming to the U.S. and coming to Orange County to settle. Oh my God, where to start, right? I think like at the baseline, fundamentally, the United States is broken in a lot of systemic ways, right? I think like we can just look around like healthcare, education, data, job security. I think you can name it, name anything, right? And I think like that's something that is felt within the Vietnamese American community, right? I think that we see a lot around COVID, anti-Asian hate, where it's just a blanket, like all these attacks towards Asian folks, regardless, that are so totally unjustified and just like really, really hateful. I think like one of the common beliefs is that Asian Americans like are able to access and like have language ability, but at the same time, like there's a lot of folks who are monolingual, right? So if we don't have services, if we don't have even just like access to understanding how to navigate any of these things, is really difficult, right? And so there's a lot of bad things I think that added to the struggles. And what I seen growing up is that the Vietnamese community is just very resilient. And I think like sometimes I get tired of the word resilient, but it is, right? I mean, I think like a lot of times people find importance in a different way, in lots of different ways, right? I think I remember growing up a lot of like garage parties, right? So a lot of family gatherings, eating together at a garage. So I mean, in a deeper level, I feel like someone's garage would be important, right? That one person that convenes the different generations, whatever that might be. Like a lot of times your history doesn't get told when you're sitting down and listening, right? Your history gets told when you're washing dishes, or like when someone's chopping up like some vegetables, or like when you're making egg rolls. It's like, I'm making egg rolls, but let me tell you about that time about like your family back in the day, And so I think those are the areas of importance. At least I say it's important for myself, because those are the moments where it feels like there isn't an agenda when telling about a story, almost when telling about history, because it can be really difficult with a community that has a lot of hurt, that is the Vietnamese community, to be able to share that so freely, right? To be able to like know how to share that, right? So I think the kitchen's a very important place. And for me, being a queer Vietnamese Catholic, I think a lot of places that's supposed to be sacred to the Vietnamese community, church, whatever, are not necessarily so for myself. And I think like paying homage to the organization I'm part of, VROC. A lot of the safe spaces were whoever would open their door, right? Whether that's like finding a space within a parent who has a queer kid, someone who is queer who has a home, even just spaces where you can feel like you have community, and like these little things are really sacred. But yeah, importance is really difficult. I vaguely remember the high tech incident over in, was it Bolsa? Bolsa, which is where the video store manager put up a picture of Ho Chi Minh, which is controversial in the Little Saigon community. Put up there, and people saw him and would like take it down. And he's like, "Well, I'm exercising one of my rights to keep it up." And his hopes was to have a dialogue about the differences in the Vietnamese community, and that was not met well. That was very bad. And so a mass demonstration and protest. And I feel like I only have fuzzy memories of it because I was still like a baby at that time. But I remember my mom not being there, right? Because she had went to the protests. She was sharing like, she felt like this obligation to be there. And that was like the first time she was so compelled to speak. It was a really big turning point in Little Saigon for a lot of Vietnamese-Americans, being able to feel grief publicly for a long time. And my mom was sharing like there was a big because she's very, very, very Catholic. She was like, there was a church ceremony for people who were lost at sea. Like it was more than just like a demonstration of like political ideology, but it was a time with cathartic kind of feelings coming out, I think for the first time feeling like they can make a say. And so another one that I remember, and so prior to 2013, around like 2010, LGBTQ folks, Vietnamese Americans, were able to march in that parade. And so when in 2013, when the parade organizers switched from a public entity, I believe that was the city of Westchester, into a private the Vietnamese Federation of Southern California, or something like that, a private organization, that's when they rejected the application for Vietnamese Americans to march in the parade on the basis and saying being LGBTQ is not part of the Vietnamese culture. In Little Saigon, the LGBTQ Vietnamese organizers, they gathered moms who had queer kids, they gathered other allies, they gathered people from all over to protest for a year long. And they went on the news to share their stories, the Vietnamese news. I think like maybe even they got like nationwide press, right? And they organized, they went to speak at city council. How can they like provide a permit to a blatantly homophobic organization? They went to the sponsors, and it was like, so some sponsorships got pulled, and it was a year-long kind of campaign, but it was really galvanizing and brought a lot of communities together. And I think that the older gay Viets who've been around, who started organizations in the 90s, like be able to come together to fight and everything. And afterwards, they were able to march, and we've been marching ever since. I think it will look interesting, right? I think like as more generations are popping up, as more people are trying to connect with the Vietnamese community in some different way. I mean, we have dual language schools. That's pretty amazing, right? We have people, Vietnamese American authors writing stories, like not even just like memoirs, because everyone be writing a memoir, but like children's stories, graphic novels. Like we have more access to this experience of grappling with understanding your community, right? Whether that's because you're a second gen, you're 1.5, you're like younger, whatever. We see Pixar doing it, right? We see them doing it with everything, intergenerational trauma, right? So I think like a lot of people are really resonating with that. It's hard to say, but hopefully the Earth is still there in like 5 to 10 years. I really don't know. I'm on her side though. We're best.